Welcome to another edition of South Asia Chat, a podcast brought to you by the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. I am your host, Ramita Iyer, and I work as a research analyst at the Institute. In this episode, we will be delving into the concerns over South Asia's environmental security, the impact of climate challenges, and what the different countries in the subcontinent are doing to tackle climate and other related issues. The World Bank earlier this year declared South Asia to be one of the most vulnerable regions to climate shocks. Intensifying heat waves, cyclones, and floods in the region are now testing the limits of governments, businesses, and citizens to adapt to their new climate normal. South Asia is home to more than 600 million poor people where climate resilient solutions are the need of the hour. Without further ado, let me now bring on our guest, Dr. Sufia Khanom, a senior research fellow at the Bangladesh Institute of International and Strategic Studies. Dr. Khanom, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
To start off, can you give us an insight into the environmental security situation in South Asia?
Um, Thank you, Ramita, for inviting me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on this topic. First, we all know that the environment refers to the biological, physical, and chemical components of the system necessary to sustain life. This is a broad agenda within which there are multiple issues such as resource scarcity, and pollution and occurring at the multiple scales from global to local, and in different ways and to different degrees as places around the world, and South Asia is not exceptional in this fact. So environmental problems are now prominent in the political issues as a consequence of the increased scale of consumption and pollution in the modern high energy societies, which is caused large decrease in primary forest cover, biodiversity losses, and depletion of fish stocks, land degradation, water pollution, and scarcity, coastal and marine degradation, and the contamination of people, plants, and animals by chemicals and the radioactive substances, and the most pressing issues, the impact of the associated impact of the climate change. If we summarize the plurality of the meanings of the environmental security, so we can categorize into six principal interpretation of what does it mean by the security. So first, the environmental security can be seen as a being about the impacts of the human activities on the environment, and second, the environmental security can be seen to about the impacts of the military industrial complex, including war, on the environment. And third, the environmental change can be seen as a security problem common to all states, therefore recurring collective action. And fourth, the environmental changes can be seen as a threat to national security. Fifth, the environmental change can be seen identified as a possible cause of the violent conflict due to the resource scarcity, And sixth, the environmental change can be seen as a risk to the human security. I think in that way we can define the environmental security, and we can link it to the human security, and it also can be connected with the regional security and regional cooperation.
How do you assess the response of South Asian states to the climate emergency? Can you tell us about some of the key steps or what is now referred to as climate smart solutions that are being undertaken by them?
Yes, I think this is very important question, that how the South Asia is actually responding to this changing world. As you told earlier, that according to World Bank, that South Asia is one of the most vulnerable regions to climate change, and its people are living through the new climate normal, are intensifying the heat waves, cyclones, droughts, and floods are testing the limits of the governments, businesses, and the citizens to adapt. If you see the hottest city like the Jacobabad in Pakistan, and where the temperature was very high, and then the human body can handle, and in 2020 more than 3 million people are evacuated to safety from the fury of super cyclone Amphan. So at the same time, South Asia has um, because uh, most of the countries of the South Asia focus at the development. So, with this changing environment and the focus on development, it is very hard to match with these two goals together. So there are many examples how the South Asia is already leading the way in sustainable and resilient development. For example, India is one of the world's leader in installed solar energy, and Bangladesh is a model for the world in terms of building coastal resilience. And however, now more than ever, more urgent transformational climate action will pave the way for the resilient, sustainable recovery in South Asia. So, emerging green sectors like battery technologies, e-mobility, climate-smart agriculture, and water management, and climate-friendly housing and industrial decarbonization offer South Asian countries a new paradigm to generate the growth and create sustainable jobs. So, now I will just focus some of the major initiatives that the South Asian countries have taken to tackle the climate change, the impacts, especially the negative impacts of the climate change. So I'm starting with Bangladesh. So the government of Bangladesh instituted climate change cell in 2004. In the climate relevant ministries and the line agencies to mainstream the climate change issues in the development activities, and a change unit was established in the Ministry of Environment and Forest in 2010 to facilitate and coordinate with the climate change cells and manage the climate change fund. So the National Adaptation Program of Action, that is in short, it is called NAPA, was completed in 2005 and further updated in 2009. And in 2008, the government also adopted Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy Action Plan. In short, it is called BCC SAP, focusing on the six priorities like food security, social protection, and health, comprehensive disaster management, infrastructure development, research and knowledge management, mitigation and low carbon development, capacity building, and institutional strengthening. And Bangladesh also has developed the climate change trust fund to support and to recover the impacts of this changing climate. And Bangladesh also has prepared the prosperity plan, for the longer vision. And then again the delta plan, which is actually for plan for the 100 year, which also emphasize on the impacts of the climate change and how the country can recover from these impacts. And then Bhutan has completed its National Adaptation Program of Action, that is NAPA, in 2006. And a National Environment Commission, in short it is called NEC, serves as the local agency for the climate change, and its high level commission members from the National Climate Change Committee. And there are a lot of Bhutan's policy guidelines of Vision 2020 and good government plans, plus emphasize ramping up the climate change mitigation by developing hydropower and solar energy resources. You know that Bhutan has a huge resource of renewable energy because of because of its geographic position. And then again, India launched its National Action Plan on Climate Change in June 2018, under which it has established 8 national missions to address the various aspects of the climate change mitigation and adaptation. And they are the national missions on solar energy, enhanced energy efficiency, sustainable habitat, water sustaining the Himalayan ecosystem, greening in India, sustainable agriculture, and strategic knowledge for climate change. And if we focus on the Nepal finalized its national adaptation plan, national adaptation program of action, that is NAPA, in 2010. And the Ministry of Environment, where it is served as a focal ministry of the climate change related activities, and has recently established a climate change management division. A multi-stakeholder climate change initiatives coordination committee was started in April 2009 to foster a unified and coordinated climate change response. And Nepal launched a 3-year interim sustainable development plan in 2007 to 2010 that focuses on improving environment management and sustainable natural resources. And they are also focusing on the clean development mechanism, and the renewable energy and the community forestry projects. And if we focus on Sri Lanka, that the Mahindra Chintana 10-year plan set out the overarching development strategy of the country and acknowledge the importance of sound environmental management. And the Sri Lankan governments also prepared the National Action Plan for Haritha. It means the green. Lanka program, which provides a framework for the environmental issues and programs, so which also focusing on the for combating the impacts of the climate change. And then again, the Maldives, which is actually, I would say, that the most prominent voice in the climate negotiation for the impacts of the climate change. And the Maldives prepared its NAPA in 2006, identifying 11 priority adaptation projects focused on the coastal and the coral reef protection, adaptation in agriculture and freshwater and fisheries, and food security and health. The implementation of Maldives NAPA has been boosted by the signing in December 2009 of a four-year initiative, which is called the Integrating Climate Change Risk into Resilient Island Planning in Maldives. The project co-financed by the United Nations Development Program and the Global Environmental Facilities, and which will systematically assess the cost and benefits of the different adaptation options in the land use planning and the coastal protection, and develop the necessary institutional capacity to implement the NAPA. So these are actually very much, this is not the coordinated effect as I was discussing, and these are actually the individual initiatives of each of the states of the South Asia.
Thank you so much for that comprehensive insight into what each South Asian country has been doing to deal with the climate emergency that it is faced with. So, one of the key things that you highlighted right at the start was the debate between environment versus development. And this is pertinent for all South Asian countries, which are mostly developing or least developed countries. And this brings me to the next part of our conversation, which is a related issue to the climate emergency, and that's of migration. A new study has revealed that more than 62 million South Asian people will be forced to migrate from their homes due to different climate disasters by the year 2050. Can you tell us about the impacts of climate migration and the challenges that it poses?
Yes, this is very important issue for the South Asian countries, because we are the developing countries or the least developing countries. And I think the most important aspects that we need to think, the South Asian countries need to think, that the demographic imbalance. So when people are actually shifting from one place to another, whatever it is maybe internal or it may be external. So there is a demographic shift and demographic imbalance, because when people are migrating from the coastal areas to the city, then there is a demographic imbalance, which is actually a national security threat for the each of the state, because our cities are not prepared, to receive this huge amount of migrants. And sometimes it is also creating tension among the neighboring countries, that people are migrating into our countries due to this climatic pressure. So I think this is a huge national security and the regional security aspect of this of this climate migration. And as I told earlier, that it is creating pressure, huge pressure on the service sectors in the urban governance, because every our urban planning has a estimation that how much people they can serve. But when this climate induced migration happens, there is no statistics that how many people are coming every day from the coastal belt or the climate vulnerable portion. So it is a very much major planning issue for the urban governance. And then again, the environmental perspective, like when the people are coming to the city, they are actually settling in the peri-urban or the semi-urban areas which are left behind by the urban planners or the policy makers. So they are filling up the lowlands in the peri-urban or in the semi-urban areas and destroying the natural flows of the water. And then again the powerful groups actually in the urban area who are actually helping them to settle down and creating slums and the informal settlements in the government land or in the cash land or any other lowland in that peri-urban areas for the encroachment purpose. So migrants are then again in the cycle of patron client relationship, and these migrants are patronizing by the powerful local people, which creates a lot of social and political unrest through capitalizing their vulnerabilities. And they are not able to go far away from the environmental disaster because the place where they are settling down, these places are not suitable for the living. So they are facing the water logging, the drainage congestion, and there are a lot of health issues in these areas. There are a lot of vector borne diseases like dengue. They are more suffering from this type of diseases. So I think this is the major one of the major concern of the climate change impacts, and which needs to be taken care of. I think we need to make a clear data bank of the climate migration or the climate induced migration.
Moving from challenges to how South Asian countries negotiate, can you tell us about the negotiations carried out by the different countries in the region in international and regional forums, and what is your assessment of their performance?
You know that the climate negotiation in the climate change international climate negotiation is actually fragmented, since the beginning because of the interest and the focus. And from the very beginning in the 1992, and the fragmentation of the negotiation has been attributed to varying interest, concerns, vulnerabilities, resources, and the other factors among the negotiating parties. And it has led to formation of the various groupings and blocks within the UNFCCC that negotiate based on the issues of the common concerns. So this formation, which emerged at the different points of time during the course of the negotiation, are characterized by the either they are the geological proximity or the common shared of interest. So it is also important to note that these formation are not exclusive and are mostly overlapping with the members of one grouping or blocks. So the fragmentation need not necessarily be seen as either positive or negative, as differing interpretation and perspectives have brought out possibilities of both conflict and cooperation among the nation states in the age of the climate change. So and then again, if we see South Asia is considered as one of the most climate vulnerable and politically fragmented in the world. So there will be fragmentation in the climate change negotiation, which is very normal. If we see that the Copenhagen summit in 2019, actually the negotiation and the interest area was much more visible after that. So if I mention that Bangladesh and Maldives are two of the most the loud voices at the negotiation by framing climate change as an existential threat to their survival, have played a pivotal role in the driving the negotiation forward. So other countries like Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and Afghanistan have also been leading voices for the climate action at the UNFCCC, uh, but maybe to a later extent than if I compare it to Bangladesh and Maldives. So South Asia as a region cannot be treated as a monolith, or there is no one size fits all approach to framing or responding to climate change among its countries. So, if I say the division among the South Asian countries in terms of their position at UNFCCC is also somewhat reflected in the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation in the SARC, and wherein, despite the push for the regional action plans on climate change targeted at specific sectors or issues, So there has been little progress towards achieving the climate goals or even reaching a consensus or a common position on the climate change. Unlike other regional grouping, if you see that the African Union or at the same time the South Asian countries are also group member of the G77, the developing countries, a negotiating bloc that is deeply focusing or strongly advocates for the equity and the climate justice. But then again, India is also a part of major formal or on informal groupings of such as the basic grouping, that Brazil, South Africa, and China, and major economic forum on energy and climate, among others, that make the country distinct from the other South Asian countries. So whereas the other South Asian countries are focusing, like Bangladesh, Maldives, Afghanistan, Nepal, Bhutan, are members of the vulnerable 20, constituted by the world's 20 most affected states by the catastrophic effect of the climate change. And this climate vulnerable forum actually was initiated by the Maldives government in 2019 after the Copenhagen summit. There is a clear distinction or the difference, the activities of the basic countries and the CVF. And there are a lot of drivers for this negotiation in the South Asian nation, that why these South Asian nations are actually behaving differently in the different forum. So if we see the South-South cooperation, which is at the heart of the G7 group 77, so which is emphasized on the development cooperation, and it is focusing on the North-South aid. So in that platform, all the South Asian countries are actually working together, and this is based on the equity and justice issue, and respect, and it has the respect for the national sovereignty, equity and the mutual benefit. And then again, the if you see the South Asian nation have used the platform, the group 77, to project a united stance on issues such as the adaptation as well as the financial and technical support. Then again, the small state, association of the small island, and the CVF, both are actually supported an ambitious legally binding agreement that would limit the temperature rise to below 1.5 degrees Celsius, and would require both the developed and the developing countries to act in terms of the climate change mitigation, with the precondition that the latter group would receive support from the former group. So, however, the basic countries are in favor of a bottom-up approach that is not the necessarily legally binding and ensure less intrusiveness. And if we with this, if we focus on the exploring the opportunities for the cooperation among the South Asian countries, then again the geopolitics is there within the South Asian countries, so which is very much prominent in the negotiation, in the negotiation platform. And if you see the African common position on the climate change, or the ASEANs, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, they have a constant attempts to engage in the common position on issues related to the climate change. But if we see about the South Asian countries, equivalent of SARC has barely has any common ground for negotiation. And here I would say that the much more focus is much more nationalistic interest than the regional aspect. I can cite one of the example, that the International Solar Alliance that is launched in 2015 by India and France, and this organization that brings together the sun-rich countries, and South Asian countries are also sun-rich and energy poor at the same time. So the regional energy, renewable energy sectors in these countries face several policy, technical, and economic and other challenges, including the lack of investment due to the high initial cost and delayed profit or benefits, paucity of the technical and technological capacities and formation, etc. So these obstacles could be overcome through the cooperation at the of the International Solar Alliance, and translating into a greater understanding at the UNFCCC as well. So, especially in the developing idea of the climate justice. So, this could be a like glorified example of how South Asia can work together, and for this type of negotiation where there is a resource, but we need extra support from the developed countries where the South Asia can cooperate, and they can use this negotiation platform for their own development.
I'd like for us to close this podcast looking at potential solutions. As you've illustrated through our conversation, the climate situation in South Asia is quite grave, and working together has been difficult. But tackling problems together and having coordination among countries is seen as an effective way to combat the climate issue. But given the economic, social, and environmental risks that they face, as well as the disparities between the different countries, what are the steps that they can take to maximize their gains from working together?
Thank you, Ramita, for the question. So, I think we need to focus on the issues that are why South Asian countries couldn't cooperate first. So, if we have not seen a like a river treaty like over a quarter century, and crucial shared resources such as the air and the underground water aquifers and the biodiversity. Although Bangladesh and India have a memorandum of understanding in 2011 on the Sundarban joint management of the Sundarban, but it is still not operating, and these type of initiatives remain largely ungoverned, and there is again constantly changing the plans for the regional electricity trading mechanisms, and also there is no plan for using these renewable resources of the South Asian countries, and there is also the diplomatic bitterness among the South Asian countries. So if we see that there is a SARC action plan on the climate change, and there is a joint declaration by the South Asian environment ministers in Dhaka in 2008. But we have already forgotten all these issues, and this is very much surprising that the idea of SARC has been eroded by the unforgiving tides of the recent geopolitics, and institutions such as the SARC seem to be at the point of no return. So it is ironic that after decades of painstaking diplomatic works, we are left without an institutional safety net, just as climate crisis and other cross-border threats. So in terms of the regional climatic cooperation, the arbitrary nature of the national borders makes climate change hard to manage, so they are determined by the politics and often completely neglect the ecological boundaries and planetary system. So today, the impacts are felt across the hard borders. Melting glaciers are changing the hydrology of the entire Hindu Kush and Himalayan region and its 8 countries. Erratic monsoons risk driving droughts in some parts of India, and in other South Asian countries, devastating floods in the other parts of them. So we need to focus on the mitigation options and the adaptation options. So where the South Asian countries can work together to minimize the impacts of the climate change. And the bulk of the climate actions will undeniably have to happen at the national and subnational scales. But regional cooperation offers novel opportunities for the progress. For example, as I mentioned earlier, that the regional electricity grid would allow India to sell the renewable power to its neighbor while they help balance sudden fall in production. So then again, the joint planned river basins, could focus on reviving the trade through inland waterways, which actually could mean significantly less emissions than the road transport. So, if we can focus on the inland water transport among the South Asian countries, it will be climate friendly, it will be cost effective, and it will have the less carbon footprints. So we need to focus on this type of initiatives for the regional cooperation. And then again, I can give some of the policy suggestions for the regional cooperation that can be considered for the policymakers or for the people, those who are actually in the process of the regional cooperation. First, we can that all the South Asian governments have publicly expressed their climate anxieties and established a variety of climate policies. As I mentioned earlier, a scientific evidence has grown, but we need a regional policy for the climate change policy. We need the data sharing policies so that we can cope with the disaster or the upcoming disaster we can handle. And then again, the climate finance commitment from the developed countries and the multilateral organizations are growing and could easily be challenged to the channeled to projects that would benefit. So where the South Asian countries can work together, as the disasters are not maintaining the national geographic boundaries or the national boundaries, so we can minimize or we can mitigate this type of impacts together from a common fund. And I think we need a regional leadership, which is very much lacking in this sector. We need to break the diplomatic deadlocks. We need to forget the geopolitical tensions or the conflict in this aspect, because climate change will not focus, or the impacts will not like consider the geopolitics or geopolitical tension among the South Asian countries.
Thank you for being on the podcast, Dr. Khanom. You were listening to South Asia Chat. To learn more about our work, visit us at isas.nus.edu.sg. You can also get latest updates on social media. We're on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram.